I think for entrepreneurs, there's no default community. You're on your own. It's sort of the hero's journey. You start by yourself, that pioneer spirit. Within 2 years of retiring as a CEO, 50% of CEOs are dead. Part of that is their whole purpose is gone, but their community has disappeared. I had a friend who left his job voluntarily 2 years ago, was a pastor of a very large church. And 2 days after that, he's like, nobody texts me anymore. You look at the Apostle Paul in the first century. He's going from city to city, town to town, country to country, planting churches. He has an entrepreneurial vision. So I think that is a spiritual gift. I think of it as spiritual entrepreneurship.
Bold visionaries, faithful disruptors. Some call them crazy, but they are called to create. Under His power, for His glory. The Faith-Driven Entrepreneur Podcast.
Welcome back to the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. This week, we have a special friend in studio with us, Carey Nieuwhof, who spent years launching and building and supporting churches, but has also spent a lot of time in an entrepreneurial venture. And so he understands this conversation of entrepreneurs and pastors coming together. Today, we're going to talk about what does it look like to do more together than we might otherwise do apart. So the most important topic, because we can't start anywhere without starting with USA-Canada hockey, right? I mean, that's the pressing question on everyone's mind. Is this a renewed rivalry that will continue to get more heated?
So I'm one of 6 Canadians who doesn't watch hockey.
Oh,
can you believe that? I know who won, and I know we won in overtime.
Okay.
But I heard about it the next day. Yeah, it's weird. My boys love hockey. My youngest one was really, really good at it and played into his high school years. And then, your kids leave home and you realize, I'm not really a sports guy.
Yeah.
There's only so many hours in a day. But yeah, potentially, we're feeling pretty threatened right now.
Yeah, well, as an American, we have to remind you that we did win the one before that a week earlier, because otherwise, we got to show it's an even score. You won the big one.
My wife's a dual citizen, and I'm a permanent resident of the U.S. and a Canadian citizen. So, I guess we have divided loyalties. There you go.
House divided.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't care so much about hockey, I hear you care very much about lawn care.
Yes, that is a subject that's a hill to die on.
Where does this come from? Like, were you given a lawnmower as a child, the Fisher-Price kind?
Yeah,
and it just all started there?
I probably was. I was like cutting lawns by 8 o'clock, or by age 8, I should say. I don't know. It was just something I've always, I have a theory about it, that leadership is complicated and it's never done. And you're always dealing with issues that are going to be here tomorrow and next month and next year. You get some stuff done, but a lot of it's just complex. The thing I love about lawn care is you start and 40 minutes later you're finished. And it went from long to short, from disheveled to orderly.
Yeah.
I have the same thing with cars. I love washing cars, have since I was a kid. If this all fell apart tomorrow, might open up an auto detail business or car wash or something like that, just because, again, it was dirty, now it's clean. It wasn't looking great, now it looks fantastic. Now it looks showroom. Like, I love stuff like that. And I think it's a reaction to the soft stuff of leadership, whether that's in ministry or in running a company, and I've done both. It's just start to finish done.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah, in the life of the entrepreneur, so hard to measure that progress sometimes. There's KPIs, but
you look at your KPIs, you look at your reports, you look at your financials. There's progress, but really, like, to go from, it's long to it's short and looks fantastic in terms of lawn. It looks like, the Masters, like, sign me up.
Yeah. So give everybody a quick flyover. So one of the things we're going to push into today is this conversation of the church and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
You've been able to really cross over both of those. Give everybody a quick flyover of your journey and how you've spent time on both sides of the fence there.
So, yeah, I came to ministry sort of in a very unusual way. From the time I was 8 years old, wanted to become a lawyer. Followed that, got into the law school of my dreams. Met my wife there. That was the best thing to come out of law school. Practiced, worked in a law firm for a year, got called to the bar, resigned, because in the middle of law school, felt a call into ministry. And I was a Christian, but the idea, I was going to be a Christian attorney, right? That kind of thing. So I go into seminary, I'm kind of lost. What am I going to do? I don't have the gift profile because I'm entrepreneurial for a typical pastor that's going to sit by your hospital bed and hold your hand, that's going to do weddings and funerals. And I've done all of that, right? But I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't fit the mold. So I thought, well, maybe I'll teach. I'll get a doctorate. But in Canada, the church is not in good shape and hasn't been in good shape my entire life. So a lot of churches really struggle to hire a full-time pastor. And I was, at the time, when I was in seminary, part of a mainline denomination. So there were 3 little churches that banded together about an hour north of Toronto that were looking for a pastor. And they were looking for a seminary student because they could pay us half of what they would pay a real pastor. And I thought that was a good deal. So partway through school, went up there, preached for a call. They invited me to come and serve as a student pastor. So full lead pastor responsibilities, half the price. I said yes. And we're still there 30 years later. So that was 3 decades ago. And they were small churches in need of revitalization. The attendance literally was 6 people at one. So us and the crew was like church on Sunday. And then the second church had 14 people. And then I'd wrap up at the mega church with 23 people. So we would do that. And then they started to grow. By the time I handed things off 10 years ago, we were 3,000 or 4,000 people called our church home. We had attendance of over 1,000 on the weekend, and we had been through multiple iterations. So I kind of went into church planting when we left the denomination and started over again as a portable church. We'd gone through a couple of facilities, and then I opened up our broadcast location, Tapped Out. So last decade, I've been doing this. I've been building into leaders, podcasting, speaking, writing books. And the way I think about it is I went to law school, never learned how to run a law firm. That's a big issue in law. Nobody knows how to get along or how to manage or lead or even make money. And I went to seminary and I had to figure out how to run a church on my own. So now I really help leaders fill in the blanks. It's like, here's what you didn't learn in seminary. And, a lot of it's the soft skills. Like, how do you prevent burnout? How do you manage teams? How do you raise money? Stuff like that honestly, you're never going to pick up in Old Testament hermeneutics.
That's good. That's good. So push into this topic. So we're just off this conference we had for pastors and entrepreneurs. And obviously at Faith Driven Entrepreneur, we're passionate about kind of building that bridge. And we think that this conversation that oftentimes when entrepreneurs have gotten frustrated, when they haven't felt like they've been understood, they've just been an entrepreneur. They innovate and they just go do it. And in some ways miss that opportunity of going together. Where is that disconnect start? Where does that disconnect start with a pastor and entrepreneur? Is it, do they have more, are they more alike than they are different? Are they more similar? Are they more different really? And we kind of think that they're the same? Like where does this all start? Where does that gap begin?
There's a lot in the question. So I think there are some pastors who definitely are entrepreneurial. You go to a church planting conference like ARC or Acts 29, you're going to find entrepreneurs everywhere. You're not planting a church is not for the faint of heart. You have to create something out of nothing. You have to believe, you have to have faith. So that whole idea about starting a business or starting a church, very, very similar parallels. And I mean, Paul called it the gift of apostleship. I think of it, I don't want to contradict Paul. Okay, I'm not going to go there. But I think of it as spiritual entrepreneurship. That, you look at the Apostle Paul in the first century. He's going from city to city, town to town, country to country, planting churches, right? He has an entrepreneurial vision. So I think that is a spiritual gift. So that unites it. There's a lot of pastors, honestly, who see themselves as shepherds, as caretakers, as the ones who would hold the hand. They're not as entrepreneurial. To be an entrepreneur, and I come from entrepreneurial stock. So my dad and mom were entrepreneurs. Dad was an immigrant. Both were immigrants. My mom came over as a child. My dad came over as a 19-year-old. They met in Canada. But Dad got promoted. My mom stayed home for the first decade, but Dad got promoted quickly. He was a tool and mold maker. So for example, this cup or your Yeti, he would, not the metal part, but the plastic part, he'd make the metal molds. He'd pour the plastic into and out pops a Yeti lid, that kind of thing. So he did that for 25 years. And my parents, I watched them start it when I was a teenager. So, of course, across the dinner table, you're taking notes. And I saw the ups and the downs and we almost went bankrupt and, now we're profitable. I watched all of that as a teenager right into, 20 years ago, like almost 40, I saw my parents run their shop. And, I think a lot of the lessons really transfer. And I've always been super comfortable around the business leaders, like who attended our church. So anytime there's an entrepreneur, whether they owned a garage that fixed your muffler, or whether they were in real estate or whatever they were, but sort of the people who worked for themselves and the professionals really, really felt a symmetry with them. You also asked a question. I don't want to read too much into the question about community. So I think for entrepreneurs, there's no default community. It's like you're on your own. It's sort of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
You start by yourself, that pioneer spirit. You probably start alone, and a lot of people die alone or don't make it alone.
Yeah.
In the church, we're in a really interesting period. The biggest church in America right now is a non-denominational church. And that's a phenomena that really has emerged in the last 20 years. So if you go back 50 years, what do you have? You have denominations. And so this idea that you have a band of brothers, a band of sisters that you're doing this with. But what's happened is Christianity has declined, and there's very new research that says that's starting to turn around, which is awesome.
Yeah, very encouraging. Absolutely.
New York Times just recently ran a big article about it. So that's awesome. But, you had people you were doing this with. And then what happened when I graduated in the 90s was denominations have started breaking down. So I was sort of conservative, evangelical, entrepreneurial, and it was like Sesame Street. Wait, one of these things is not like the other. I did not find a lot in common with a lot of other people in my denomination, which a decade into it made me restart over again. And we became a North Point church. North Point, very entrepreneurial. Starting new things. It's now the Irresistible Church Network. But I mean, I was in on that when the lead pastor retreat was Andy Stanley and 5 of us sitting around a boardroom table. That was fun.
Those are some fun memories.
That was fun. Yeah. Or sitting around a cabin or whatever. Now it's hundreds of churches around the world, which is great. So I think what you've seen community really shift. But many denominations are in decline. Non-denominational churches are the fastest by every measure. Warren Bird, Ryan Burge, Pew Research, whoever you're looking at. Non-denominational churches are now bigger than denominational churches. If you look at statistically, the number of people who belong to like a Lutheran or Presbyterian or mainline church, more people now belong to non-denominational churches. So that means you're unaffiliated.
Yeah.
So you have networks, and often I think that I was reading some data that shows that a lot of pastors will belong to 2 or 3 networks. So we're part of, ARC, but we're also part of this community network, and we're also part of this other network that is loosely tied to, some other movement or whatever, a 24/7 prayer or something like that.
More and more pastors are realizing the church can be a launching pad, equipping entrepreneurs to build redemptively and make a real difference. We've made it simple to serve the entrepreneurs in your church and your city. No cost, no catch. Get access to a ready-to-go video series, templates, and tools to host an 8-week foundation group right in your church. Just register with us, and we'll even direct local entrepreneurs to your community. We're building a network of 250 partnering churches across the country, each one featured as a go-to hub for faith-driven entrepreneurs in the area. Want to join the movement? All it takes is a 10-minute call with our team. Visit the link below to get started.
So I love what you're talking about, like this idea of community being redefined. Are we coming to a point where that word needs to stop being used and something else needs to be used in place of it? And I don't know what that is, but like it's a word that says everything means nothing. And I think that there's this challenge because I think entrepreneurs carry some of this guilt of, well, my church says that I should be in this community based on my zip code or based on my kid's age or stage or some people that I met, but I don't find anybody like me. I don't find any entrepreneurs here. I just feel like I can't be fully known and understood. Then I've got this other community out here. Maybe it's a faith-driven entrepreneur group, a C12 group, convene, whatever these groups are. And you're kind of living in this. And I think what you're making the case for is it's okay to be in both. And actually, that's not too uncommon. That's what churches are going through. That's what pastors are going through. Do we need to use new language to define what community is? Like, are we hijacked by that
that's a
word?
great question that I don't know the answer to. I don't know whether etymology, I can't think of what else we would call it, but let's go back 130 years, okay? So you're back in the 1890s. All you had was local. I mean, you look at this sociologically over centuries, like all of human history. You know, the average person, for the vast swath of human history, never traveled more than 50 miles outside his or her village. I mean, we read about Paul. We've already talked about him going around the Mediterranean. That was unusual, right? If you were born in Carthage, you died in Carthage.
Yeah.
And Robin Dunbar, the British evolutionary sociologist, makes the argument that most people had the capacity for about 200 relationships. That's why, you know, not trying to get us too far off course, why is dating so hard today? Because you've got a million options, literally 4 billion options.
Yeah.
So when you were in a village of 200 people, you kind of looked around and went, well, she'll do, right? Like, what are you going to do, right? Like, he'll be okay, I guess. He's a blacksmith. I guess it'll work, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how human beings have responded.
Yeah.
And church and entrepreneurs were that way too. So you had guilds, right? You had the blacksmith guild, and maybe you'd be blacksmiths with 5 different villages, or the carpenters guild, or whatever, and that gave birth to trade unions. But then with the Industrial Revolution, with you know, the invention of the car and mobility, suddenly you could be born in New York but go live in St. Louis. And there was the whole westward move in America, and this idea of we are going to be location independent. We'll go back 25 years ago. Now you have the internet.
Yeah.
And so what I think you've seen is a lot of people go, I am in my village. I don't see a lot of people like me. And before, that was the end of the sentence. It was a period went there. Now it's, and I can jump on LinkedIn and discover all of these amazing people, or Instagram or TikTok or X or wherever you happen to be. I discover all these amazing people, and this person's like me. So like in Canada, I used to gather in Toronto with about 10 people who led larger churches, which is very rare in Canada to have a church over 1,000 people. And, you know, we got together for our first meeting in Toronto, and you know what we discovered? We're all affiliated with American churches, officially or unofficially, because I was connecting with North Point, others were connecting with, at that time, Harvest in Chicago, or other churches in America. We had all looked south.
Yeah.
Because we looked around us, we couldn't find anybody. Well, entrepreneurs are the same way, church leaders are the same way. So all of those, you know, connections are being redefined. But to your original question, do we need a new name? Maybe, because what you're seeing right now is like the dating apps. I've never used a dating app. I've been married 35 years. Okay.
Good
So I'm like,
good to get that on the table.
I am speaking out of my lane of expertise.
Yeah.
But I do follow the data. And most people apparently on dating apps are not very happy.
Yeah.
And there's a next gen that's now saying, like in New York, we'll go to a running club. So I'm going to ditch Tinder, and I'm going to go to a running club that meets on Sunday morning, and we're going to run around Central Park, and we're going to meet people in real life. So I think the challenge with community is we've never been more connected, and we've never felt more alone. So all of that to say, now we have the option to go outside of our village. Now we have the option to go wherever we want. But is that real community?
Yeah.
Is that really, like, you and I have met before, but do we really know each other?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that is a really big question. And I think it's an existential question and a philosophical and a theological question that we're the first people who really have to wrestle with that. The first generation that really has to say, what is connection?
Yeah.
What is community? I don't think we know.
Yeah, I think it's just that buzzword that it's been thrown around and it's bantered around, and I think everybody wants it. So we're easy to throw the label on something to try to like accelerate it to something that we want it to be. But I mean, if it's something we've wrestled with as a team, is like we say, you know, come for the content, stay for the community. Well, community starts, it doesn't happen just on a 6 or 8 week course. Really what it is it's a course, it's a program, it's the starting of community. But like we have to really understand what community is. But I think we also, I love what you said earlier, is entrepreneurs come in with this perspective of this might be kind of my community for a season. but it's not going to be this community forever. I think somewhere in the church, we have this like, hey, you're going to find your tribe, you're going to lock shields, and, you're going to grow old together. And it's like, that could happen.
Yep.
But entrepreneurs, I think, have this like rightful conversation of saying, not rightful, that may sound too presumptive, but they have this idea that, yes, for a season, this is going to be great. But this venture might end, a new venture might begin. And we just have this idea that community has a seasonal element to it that I think is a healthy thing. But I think that we're at a crossroads, I feel like, where community is just kind of being redefined.
Well, there's a couple of categories that have been really helpful to me too, because I think it is very confusing to be alive right now because community is being redefined in real time. So Arthur Brooks talks about real friends and deal friends. And I love that metaphor. So the stats, the average CEO, heard this recently. I forget who I was talking to. I have a lot of conversations, but it was John Eldridge. Within 2 years of retiring as a CEO, 50% of CEOs are dead. And part of that is their whole purpose is gone, but their community has disappeared. I had a friend who left his job voluntarily 2 years ago, was a pastor of a very large church. And 2 days after that, he's like, nobody texts me anymore. 2 days after stepping back. And it was a voluntary, like, I want to do this new thing in my life. And I'm like, well, we're still friends. But Arthur Brooks says, those were all deal friends. They were part of the deal. Like, I do a podcast that's fairly popular. I get a lot of requests. I have a lot of friends. If I stop doing a podcast, most of those friends are going to go away. Yeah. Suddenly, I don't have what they need anymore. And I need to remind myself of that. And, think about if you're an entrepreneur, your suppliers, your clients, your customers, you stop serving in that restaurant, they're going to go away. You stop that business, they're going to leave. Those are deal friends. And then there are real friends. And back to Robin Dunbar, he says most people have the capacity for 3 to 5 deep friendships. We were texting with friends last night. They're part of our 3 to 5. They had a really big moment. I don't want to say what it was publicly. She lost something that she was running for. We're texting them last night. My wife's going to be tracking with them today, and we're going to get together as soon as we fly home. Yeah. Those are real friends. And he says real friends are, what's his language? He says they're useless, but not worthless. Useless in that I can't help you grow your podcast. Yeah. Okay. I can't help you take faith-driven entrepreneur to the next level, but they're not worthless because they're the people you sit around the fire with at night in the backyard until after midnight. They're the people you take vacations with. And those are the people who are going to be at your funeral. So I think one of the things when we're thinking about community, you want deal friends. And the problem is we all have hundreds or thousands of followers online or people that we're networked with. And we think they're friends, but they're not. Yeah. So you got to look at that. Have I got 3 to 5 real friends who don't care what I do, who if I stop podcasting tomorrow are still going to be my friends? If I get fired today, are still going to be my friends. Most people, that category is empty. There's nobody. But they're like, but I got these hundreds of people. You should see my phone. It's blowing up every day. Yeah, but you leave your job, it's not going to blow up. Yeah. So I think we're in this, again, this era that's redefining relationship community. And I think we don't even know how to do it. And when you look at anxiety, depression, loneliness, mental illnesses, they're going through the roof. Why? Because right now our definition of community is scrambled eggs, and it's doing something to the way God designed us in the human soul that is not healthy.
Yeah. So I want to push into this idea because something you said earlier, it's kind of like that born versus made kind of argument in terms of pastors that kind of get this intersection. You talk about the church planning side of things. Yeah. You talk about churches at scale that have like an affiliation with other churches that see this thing. When we look at the history of the church, there are some roles, there's some positions that maybe didn't exist 10 years ago, 20 years ago. If we look through the lens of church planners and churches at scale, what could be at this intersection of entrepreneurship and the church? And part of it, I just want to throw out this idea because we just finished this research project with David and Barna and just kind of walking through, okay, how do you bridge this gap? And what we uncovered was what more than half of pastors want to start a community for entrepreneurs in their church. They know the value of it, but they're struggling with the how. And it's interesting you talk about that CEO that kind of steps into retirement. I'm sitting there making this wondering is like 10 years from now, could there be a place where a church has a pastor for entrepreneurs, a coach for entrepreneurs, where it's the retired CEO that has the financial freedom, but as you said, is lacking in that purpose. They're lacking in that missional alignment. Could they be the unpaid but staff kind of authority level to kind of bring some of that community? And I'm throwing out a thesis. I'm throwing out an idea, but you've sat at both of those. And I want you just to imagine here for us, like what are the ways that some of these bridges could be built from the church and entrepreneurs to encourage each other in this time when community is so confusing?
You have hit a passion point for me. Yes to everything you're suggesting. I love your thesis, and I think it needs to happen. We have, entrepreneurs are unicorns. I don't know whether you have stats on this. I don't know the stat, but like a very tiny percentage of people actually start something on their own, right?
Yeah.
It's like less than a single percent actually write a book. It's got to be similar for entrepreneurs. The vast majority of people go to work for someone else. Yep. So entrepreneurs are a unicorn. They're a rare bird. You've got some in your church and they don't know how to contribute. And they're feeling alone and they're feeling isolated. So I've been gathering at more and more church gatherings, both at our church, but also other churches where I get invited, and I'm hanging out with these entrepreneurs. I love it, man. I love these people who've just sold their company or whatever they're doing. They're in private equity, whatever they happen to be doing. I feel like I get them, and I feel like the church generally doesn't. Pastors are intimidated by entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs, I'm learning, are intimidated by pastors.
Yes.
Because, this is my thesis. I'd love to hear yours, Justin. But pastors are thinking, I don't make $1 million a year. Like I haven't got staff and employees like you do. I don't feel like I measure up. And I don't know. I've talked to so many pastors who are like, I know this guy or woman could give $3 million. I'm terrified of making the ask. And I'm like, well, don't start there. How about we don't start there with, hi, my name's Carey. Will you give me $3 million, please?
Not a good
maybe we won't start there. Okay, maybe just
But on the
build a
same side, the
relationship.
pastor, the entrepreneur is just as intimidated by the pastor because they're like, man, you have such a depth and understanding of God's word and scripture. And I don't want to say something that's going to make me look foolish because I'm supposed to have it all together in all these other areas of my life. And so there's this great mutual intimidation.
That's what I think there is too. The average entrepreneur is like, you're going to ask me about Romans 8. And I haven't read my Bible in 4 days and I feel like a fraud. And your prayer life is probably way better than my prayer life. So, surprise, many pastors struggle in their prayer life too. And they struggle to make scripture come alive. So, we're all there. And then the other thing is entrepreneurs stay isolated. They don't know who else. So you'll often find them on a donor track, but they're like, okay, if I'm going to give $100,000 or $1 million to this church, you know what they're asking?
They want to roll up their sleeves. Where's it going?
Exactly. Where's it going? And who else is in?
Yeah.
Am I just a dummy? Am I giving to a cause that's kind of a lost cause? Or wait a minute. Okay, you're going to give too? Well, let's talk about your business. Let's get to know you. Okay, so you're actually going to give 10% to this church, are you? Because that's a real issue. Like if the 10% is $10,000 a year, fine, do it. If it's $100,000 a year, you think twice. If it's $1 million, you're like, can this church handle $1 million? And I know
rightfully steward it, put it into play, and scale with that.
And a lot of entrepreneurs, just because there's silence around this, say no.
Yeah.
And so they give $100,000 and the pastor thinks they're giving big. They're not giving big. They're giving it to other places. It went to the hospital. It went to the Cancer Foundation. It went to some other organization.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of things. There's a mutual intimidation. And I think you just build a relationship with people. And pastors struggle with it because they're like, we're not supposed to play favorites. No, you're not. But you also, if you have a volunteer who's serving 20 hours a week or leading a team for you, and this is true of mega churches and small churches, if they email you, you're going to get back to them.
Yeah.
If they say, do you have time for coffee? You're going to get back to them. And you may not have coffee with everybody, but not everybody is leading a team of 200 kids ministry leaders, or not everybody is leading a team of of donors for your church or whatever that happens to be. So you don't treat everyone the same. And Jesus didn't treat everybody the same. He had hundreds of disciples. And then we know from that's just one reference in a verse. It's like hundreds of disciples. And then they left it kind of up in the air. Then we know there was a group of 70 or 72.
Right.
Then we know there's a group of 12. So all of a sudden, the 70 didn't get the same access that the 12 did. But within the 12, there's 3 who had special access and 1 who had the most access. So Peter, James, and John, and Peter more than anybody. So Jesus already is giving access in different measures to different people according to their giftedness. So in the same way you might do a volunteer celebration, why not do a donor celebration?
Yeah.
Why not do an entrepreneur track? And then it's not just the relationship between the pastor and the entrepreneur. It's a relationship between the entrepreneurs and the business leaders with each other.
Yeah.
And I've been at those tables at different churches, some of the leading churches in America. And it's amazing to see them. I run a law firm. Well, I run an electrical supply company.
Yeah.
And they're connecting notes. It's like, you know what? I'm just learning that this is a ministry. They have a lot of entrepreneurs. And I know your organization exists to undo this, but they think church is on Sunday, my faith is private, I just run my company the way the Harvard Business Review says I should run it, or the way my buddies down the road say I should run it. They don't understand it's a stewardship, it's a ministry. So you can educate them, you can help them, you can connect them, and you can nurture those relationships. So I want to see churches pour fuel on that.
I think you're hitting on, there's so much that you hit on there. So I think some of the things is like that we already do this, that you're pointing to the scriptural stories of where or Jesus invested time. But I think that we're saying like, hey, we're already doing this as a church. Like, I mean, you pour into your kids ministry leaders, your small group leaders, whoever it might be. You've chosen to invest more time because they lead. I think one of the things of like what we're saying here is like entrepreneurs raise their hand. And I think the thing that you're talking about is they're not parked cars.
Yes.
They are people that want to move, that are used to moving, where so much about ministry is trying to get somebody from park to put it in drive. You're talking about people that are flying down it, that could recklessly drive off the side of the road, or they could drive really fast and really get somewhere quick with that right encouragement. And it's different. It's not better. It's just different. It's a different language. It's a different mindset. But I think that that's one of the challenges, even as this faith and work conversation becomes more nuanced. One of the things that we took from the Barna conversation was there's much to celebrate. And that you can say in the 80s and 90%, like when we surveyed entrepreneurs, they believe that they've been given these skills for a reason. They believe that they should be used to make a difference, but they're struggling at the how question. And I think it bears testament to say the last 20, 30 years, as the faith and work conversation is dialed up, praise God, what he's done. But as we get to a how moment, it's going to look different. And that's the same thing we face in church all the time. For the married couple with a bunch of kids, you're ministering to them in a how way differently from a single person. This is another one of those instances where I think when we talk about faith and work, it's interesting. A conversation that we've recently been asked is like, okay, great, we're in. How do we start a faith and work ministry for our church? I love the heart of that question, but I think there has to be a sequencing part of that conversation. Because I think if you start with the faith and work conversation, what I've seen in some churches is you might have, a series of weekly or monthly gatherings. The first one, you might feature an entrepreneur. All the entrepreneurs show up. The second one, you feature a finance person. All the entrepreneurs are like, why am I here? The third time, then you interviewed somebody in the front row of a cubicle in a service industry or whatever it might be. And now by this time, the entrepreneur's kind of disengaged.
Yes, they're gone.
So much that one of the things we struggle with at Faith Driven Entrepreneur is when we knock on a door and say, hey, we're here to help. The first question some people say is, this isn't one of those faith and work ministries, is it? Because they've tried that and they've said like, great heart, great idea, but I got stuck at the house.
Well, pastors want to be inclusive and they want to say, well, this is as much, being a stay-at-home parent is just as entrepreneurial as being, or working in a cubicle is just, and no, they're a different genre. And so I think, and if you want to be inclusive, do a donor event that rewards all donors. And then do some specific things that work with people who have the spiritual gift of giving, et cetera, et cetera.
Entrepreneurship can be a lonely journey. The weight of leadership, heavy. You've been called to create impact through your business. But here's the truth. Isolation kills vision. Comfort destroys calling. That's why Faith Driven Entrepreneur created our foundation groups. Join 10 fellow entrepreneurs who truly understand your path just for 1 hour a week for 8 weeks. Online or in person. Together you'll explore God's purpose for your business through practical, purposeful discussions with others who really get it. Don't journey alone. Your calling is too important. Visit faithdrivenentrepreneur.org and join a group today. That's faithdrivenentrepreneur.org.
You know, one of my favorite stories about how do you utilize entrepreneurs in the church. I've had the privilege of interviewing Pat Lencioni numerous times. And Patrick is one of the top business coaches, consultants, speakers alive today.
Yeah.
I mean, he commands 6-figure speaking fees, the whole deal. And Pat's a devout Roman Catholic. So he and I have had numerous conversations. And one day he said to me, and this is on the public record, so I'm not telling tales out of school. I said, "Do you feel well employed in your parish?" And he got really animated and he goes, "They want me to stand there at the door and hand out programs."
Yeah, you're hitting a hot button for Pat here. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. He was so frustrated. And I sat in his office once when he was still in Walnut Creek. He's in Franklin now.
Yeah.
And, you know, before we started recording, he's got a whiteboard on the side and he's like diagramming how to reform the Vatican and how the bishop should be redone and this should be, and he's just telling this to me because he's so passionate about it. And I'm like, this is the problem in the church. You gotta, I'm not criticizing the Roman Catholic Church. I have lots of great Roman Catholic friends and Pat's amazing. And he's not trying to criticize his priest, but he's just like, use me.
Yeah.
Like, I can help you with stuff. He's getting paid a ridiculous amount of money to fly into Southwest or some other, you know, major Fortune 50 company. And they're going to pay him a boatload of money to consult.
Yeah.
And his church is like, hand out a program. Here's a traffic cone. Go put it out in the parking lot. We don't know how to engage people who have unique gifts. And I was reading through Exodus, I think it's 31, and I got to go back to my Old Testament pronunciation. So I'm not even going to say the names, okay? Because they're those unpronounceable Old Testament names.
Yeah.
Anyway, it says, God gave these 2 craftsmen special abilities. And they were refined in gold and silversmithing, and they built the entire tabernacle. 2 people.
Yeah.
So you got hundreds of thousands of Israelites. You got 2 people who have the special gift. It wasn't like, well, let's democratize this and make sure everybody gets a chance to build the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
It's like, no, these guys have the gift. So when you've got people who've got the gift, you've got to use that gift. Like, I'm a lousy volunteer at our church, in part because I was a lead pastor and the guy with the microphone for a long time. Now I attend our church, but like, I'm in a volunteer coaching role with my successor at his request. That plays to my strengths. I would be a good board member. I could do donor development. That's about it. Now, you want to have the humility where you could be in the parking lot on a cold day or a hot day. That's fine. I can do that, but like, put me in, coach.
Yeah.
Like, I can do stuff that is going to help you move the needle. And a lot of churches, Jeff's been really good with this, my successor, a lot of churches don't have a category. So you sit in the back row and then you wonder why they show up once a month or once a quarter, or they're giving $5,000 a year when they're making $5 million a year, $500,000 a year.
So let's flip it a little bit, because I think it's easy for me. And I've felt that same thing where you feel some of the challenges of, you go down this road and you're kind of saying like, put me in, coach. And you feel like it's up to the coach to call the starting lineup, to call the play, to put the people in the game. And yet we're talking about entrepreneurs.
Yes.
We're talking about people that build stuff, create stuff. They have that superpower. It's almost like they need like a space to build, an affirmation of it. Like, how do we kind of bridge to that gap? Because it feels like entrepreneurs, like, I don't want to put this all on the pastor. I don't want to put this all in the church. I want to put like kind of this equal measure of weight to that entrepreneur to say, yeah, how do you have the humility to have that conversation? But how do you have that rightful conversation? And maybe it does lead you to a pastor and coach of entrepreneurship, or a whole team of coaches at your church. And you're the most generously equipping of entrepreneurs in your city that you can ever find. Imagine the kingdom impact that would happen there. But I want to put this in like, how do entrepreneurs have that rightful initiative in that space? Because most of the time, and maybe this is the last thought before I'd love your thoughts on this, is like, most of the times the entrepreneur is the person used to like, they are the person in charge.
Yeah, I don't need permission.
I don't need permission. And this is one of those things that maybe you're given space and you don't need permission, but you need collaboration. And that's a different season for an entrepreneur to really do that well. What does the entrepreneur need to own in this side of the equation?
Well, I think you have to conduct yourself as one under authority. You are in this sphere under the spiritual authority of the pastor. Now, I don't like what I'm going to tell you next, because I wish it was different. And I hope you're going to then reply with, oh, but Carey, you should see this church and this church because they're killing it in this area. Most pastors I know don't have a category big enough to deal with the entrepreneurial gifts in their church. It's like, and it's beyond here, stand there and hand out this program or park cars in the parking lot or lead a small group. This is our ministry. This is the way we're doing it. I don't know what to do with you.
Yeah.
I don't, other than, can you give?
Yeah.
And I'm too afraid to ask you. So that is the reality in a lot of churches. And I think that's why entrepreneurs often I'm thinking about a conversation I had with an entrepreneur who's killing it in wealth management and real estate, et cetera, who had this great idea about intake for churches, like how to basically, because he does inbound sales. He's great at it.
Yeah.
It's like, we could do this for the church. And where did the idea go? Nowhere, because the church doesn't have a category for it. So I wish that wasn't the case. Like, I'm like, but I think that's why you see so many parachurch organizations. That's why you see so many startups, is the entrepreneurs are like, yeah, they don't have room for me here. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do my kingdom play over here.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to see that changed in our lifetime. Now, hopefully this is where you step in and say, oh, but Carey, these 5 churches are doing an awesome job doing this. Are you seeing that?
We're seeing some of that. We're seeing the steps of that. Here's what I think that we're seeing. We're seeing the early steps of a church saying, we're convinced that we need to. We're convinced that we should. We want to. How?
Yes.
The Barna data is bringing it to a point where you're seeing this convincing thing that church is saying, we recognize there's an entrepreneurial voice. The church is in need of an entrepreneurial mindset. We know that we need to have this conversation. We might have more even to learn than we might have to teach entrepreneurs in some areas. And so there's a healthy understanding of role and gifting. I think there's a how question. And I think part of the wrestling is like, what should be a program and activity of the church? And what is really, actually we should just be more affirming, encouraging of what's happening outside the church. And I think that like so much when we default doing something means a program. It's like, maybe if we look at it in the government in the past, we've looked at it as, effectiveness is input versus the output, how much that we're spending on something. I think in some ways here, it feels like that there's this conversation for it to be legitimized or for it to be significant, it has to be a program. But I'm wondering if, yes, something needs to be a program. There needs to be a place of encouragement and affirming. But is more of it really just kind of recognizing, equipping people better to be like, hey, those 2,000 hours, 3,000 hours, whatever it is a year, how do you make more of that?
Yeah.
Versus that?
No, I think you're onto something. We have to look at that. But then, where the church maybe possibly could do a great job, because if you get 10 entrepreneurs in a room, now you have 10 new ministries.
Yeah.
And some of, 60% are going to end up in the ditch in the first year and they're going to fizzle out or whatever. So, we know the odds of that. But I think maybe a unique contribution for the church goes back to what we were talking about earlier, community. Because if you could facilitate, right? If you think about, I call it convening power.
Yeah.
Who has convening
100%.
power? The church has convening power. So you got 100 or 1,000 people. Let's say you have 1,000 people attending on Sunday morning. Guaranteed there's 15 to 20 small business owners, probably more than that, in your church. I don't know what the math is. If you're saying, we want to gather these small business owners, we're going to do a kickoff breakfast, you guys form community. You've probably seen Church of the Highlands, Lee Domain. Yeah. They're doing that legacy program. Like, I think that is a great move stuff, in that direction. Life Church has embraced that. Willow under Dave Dummett has embraced that. Other churches are embracing it. I think we could do that, is that learning community for entrepreneurs to go, oh, we're not alone. Genuine friendships are going to be formed out of that. We're going to compare notes. It's like, well, what did you do with staffing? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to take that back and I'm going to use that. Or wait, who's your tax planner?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Like everything there, because that'll get rid of the silos with all the entrepreneurs. And there's going to be a lot of shared learnings. And that is kingdom growth when you start giving reports that make sense. It's not just, baptism videos, but actual financial reports that make sense to entrepreneurs who have to read a P&L and understand that there's a vision gap that they could help fund. That's where you're going to start to see some real movement and momentum, I think.
It hits on this idea is that, like, there's a program and there's a place to convene, but that really is a launch pad. It's a launch pad back into their business. It's a launch pad into the community. I think one of the encouraging things that we found in this Barna statistic was that when surveyed, people in the church, 7 out of 10 believe that when entrepreneurs and the church come together, that some of the world's greatest problems can be solved. And so I think there's this idea and there's this hope that says, gosh, if you can bring that voice and then bring that perspective, whatever it is. I mean, I'd point to Freedom Fund and West Lions and some of the work of what they're doing, saying like, hey, trafficking is a terrible, terrible, evil wickedness. But we've been looking at it on a nonprofit side. What if we brought an entrepreneurial or investor mindset to saying, how do we engage the for-profit community to squash some of the darkness that's here and to really bring light to it? I think there's that opportunity, both inside the church, but also in the community, to say, gosh, what does it look like to get the entrepreneur at some of these tables where they just haven't been invited? It's been like, oh, no, that's the ministry conversation. You guys kind of go back into the business side.
Well, and I think that's why you see such an explosive growth. Like if you go back into history, I love history. In the 90s, it was all nonprofits. 20th century was all nonprofits. In the last 15 years, there's been a lot of for-profits that have started up in the church space, in the entrepreneurial space. And the only difference is, do you pay tax or not, right? Yeah. And then you have more freedom sometimes as a for-profit than you do as a nonprofit. Yeah. And you see some of the initiatives that have been started in the space, from massive advertising campaigns to, The Chosen to whatever. And you're seeing for-profit businesses really moving the kingdom forward in very encouraging ways. And so I think that's what happens, because entrepreneurs don't like to be bridled. Yeah. They don't like to be put in a box. And sometimes the church moves too slow for entrepreneurs. Let's just be honest. It does. So then what can the church do? Well, and the church is more than entrepreneurs. There's no church of entrepreneurs. Right. So maybe it's that facilitation. It's getting them connected in community. And then out of that, that's almost like a Y Combinator, like an incubator. Yeah. And out of that, in your local community, you're going to see some really cool endeavors that start. And it could be, we're starting a self-storage business. We bought some land. We're going to build this stuff out. And 20% of the profits are going to go straight back into the ministry here at the local church. Cool. Well, should the church be administering that? Probably not. But if there's 5 entrepreneurs who pool their funds and they do that together, and they agree that 50% of profits are going back into the ministry, then that's cool. And then the church doesn't have to worry about administering that.
Yeah. I think that the thing I love most about what you're saying here is it's non-prescriptive. Like, I think that we have to be really careful.
Entrepreneurs don't want to be told what to do.
They don't want to be told what to do. And we don't want to box in entrepreneurship in the church and the partnership. When we highlighted stories, we were very clear to say, hey, what worked for this church might be different for this church. That's the same when we talk about kids ministry, small group model. Everybody has some uniqueness of the culture and the place where they are.
So maybe it's facilitation and incubation. If you do the facilitating, and then you trust the entrepreneurs to do the incubation, and they launch some cool things on their own, that might be the best thing. But if they're sitting there, you got an auditorium that seats 500, and over here in the back and over there in the front and there in the middle are 3 entrepreneurs who don't know each other. It's you have that convening ability.
Yeah. That convening ability can be an email. It can be a text. It can be a call. It doesn't have to be a big program in a ministry. And I think that sometimes even just connecting people on a text thread or in a conversation after a service can give people that hit and that taste of like, wow, what could be.
You know what? You're so right. Do you know Brad Lomenick?
Of
Everybody
course.
knows Brad Lomenick. Yeah. Brad Lomenick's the best in the world at that. He knows everybody. And the number of emails / texts I get, hey, you need to know so-and-so, you need to know so-and-so. He's looking for that synergy. And if the lead or executive pastor or someone on the team is making those connections, that can sometimes be a great starting point.
That's great. Hey, as we come to a close, tell everybody about some of the other things that you're passionate about, some of the things that you're spending time on. Where can they follow lawn maintenance tips, whatever it is that you have? How can they stay connected to the conversation with you?
Yeah, we're getting into lawn mowing season, so you can go to Instagram and follow my reels for that. That'll be great. I'm really passionate about equipping church leaders. I've doubled down on helping church leaders. I'm trying to help, pastors figure all this stuff out, including a lot of what we talked about today. So I'm over at CareyNieuwhof.com. I'm also Carey Nieuwhof on most major channels. I got a leadership podcast where I interview some really intriguing people, from Adam Grant and Seth Godin, Jim Collins, to Craig Groeschel, Andy Stanley, Chris Hodges, etc. Sort of a real cornucopia of different leaders. That's probably what I spend the bulk of my time doing. And then I've written some books. I had a hinge moment in my life 19 years ago where I burned out. A decade into leadership, just hit a wall. I didn't declare a finish line, so my body did. And my life is really a hinge point. So I help a lot of leaders avoid or recover from burnout. And that's in my last book, At Your Best. So those are some things, CareyNieuwhof.com, or just find me on social.
Awesome. Well, friends, as we come to a close to this episode, great to be with you guys. Thanks for joining on this conversation. It's a big one. It's an important one. When we think about the church and entrepreneurship, there's such an opportunity to do more together than we can do apart. This website, pastorsandentrepreneurs.org, is a site that we have created recently just to be a place for that conversation. So whether it's finding some of the research about Barna, hearing some of the stories of churches that are doing some of that great stuff, we're thinking about how you can start a conversation like this in your church. I hope that that's a practical takeaway just to begin this conversation there and where you worship with your family. So great to be with you, and we will see you guys next week.
Come for content, stay for community. Join a faith-driven entrepreneur group online or in person. No cost, no catch. Visit faithdrivenentrepreneur.org. That's faithdrivenentrepreneur.org.